Hey everybody, this is Perch. We got a viewer mail here. This one says, in the margins to come back stronger. All right, let's see what this is all about. It says, hey Perch, sorry it's a long one today. That's what she said. Today I got the email from my LCS that I think many are expecting from theirs. Got told that from now on, the LCS will only stock what customers directly order. So basically, if you want to casually buy a copy of Nightwing, you can't because you didn't directly order it. Put an order down and wait till next month. That actually probably wouldn't work either because it's probably the 2 to 3 month delay in ordering. So you put an order down 2 months from now, maybe get it, or your local comic shop may be able to hook you up with a reorder or some kind of additional copy. But that's if they're going to trim back, and more and more stores are doing that. So I'm saying this: if you're one of the people who your comic shop doesn't stock a lot of stuff for the shelf, or they quickly run out, you go in and your comic book's able to go get a reorder, and before it goes to reprint, they're able to get some extra copies in the margins. They are able to do that, but if more and more comics move to the no new comics on the shelf model, then there's going to be less overflow printed, meaning that reorder option is going to dry up or at least get harder. Now, one of the things I think is going to occur, and you hear it here first, folks. I've heard some comic publishers, people in the distribution and the delivery area of comics, have started to speculate that maybe a good answer for a lot of this stuff would be to leave the window for first printing open for a year. So basically what this means is that they print a comic and then it suddenly becomes super popular, and they need to get more. One of the drawbacks is that it becomes a second printing if they have to go back to press. However, if they basically, announce that they're going to leave the window for first printings open a year, that might dent the collectability a little bit, but it would allow them to go back to press and still claim it as a first print. Now, you may say to yourself, hang on, that's a complete lie because it's not a first print. It's going for a second print. Yes. The definition has changed. That's kind of the entire thing that went on there. Is it dodgy? Is it weird? Yes. Is it going to happen? I don't know, but I don't know. I wouldn't be if you're going to hear people say, if print is slowly dying and the market does not have the window to stock all this stuff, then they're going to have to do something. I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to push it through with that idea. But anyway, wrap your head around that, folks. All right, back to the mail. It says, this applies to major books, basically this practice of not ordering anything for the shelf. This applies to major books like Batman 2. Now that they're doing this, I have no doubt that some Big 2 titles will drop completely from their stock orders if they haven't already. Something tells me this is a formality, and they've probably been doing this for a while. Probably. Or at least, heavily in this direction. There aren't minimums. I mean, you have to have a minimum order quantity, but not a minimum order quantity per book. So it's, there are definitely some comic shops that order like 2 copies of something or 1 copy of something. Basically something to, maybe sell out, maybe join the back issue pile, who knows. Anyway, back to the mail. But if every store did this for a while, would this help the industry? If it was just a direct line of customer and publisher without the excess that sits on the shelves, would that be a good thing? For the last 5 years, lots of people have been bemoaning no returnability and questioning like, okay, New Mutants sold 30,000, but how much of that is still on the shelves at half price? By the way, the people, as I've said in previous videos, the people bemoaning that are people who are ignorant about how the business works. Comic shops would not just randomly, order something and have massive excess stock on the shelf on purpose. And they might get tricked into 1 issue, 2 issues, but 3 or 4 issues go by and it's not selling. The comic shop's not just going to continually blindly let those piles stack up on the shelves. So when you see a big, thick stack of comics on the shelf, it usually means that A, somebody screwed up the order, B, there's an overship, or C, the comic shop was selling out of that and then suddenly things changed. But you go to any comic shop, you do not see like the suicidal comic shop orders just ordering in massive amounts of quantity. So anyway, be that as it may. Back to the mail. Sales would be the actual sales and not just stock orders. I don't want this to be a new normal forever, but if a bunch of stores did this for a couple of years, wouldn't that be healthy to see where the actual reliable demand is rather than what stores have been assuming or wanting the demand to be, if that makes sense? It makes sense. I think there's a flaw in your logic here, but let's finish the whole mail and see where we go. It does suck, and it will hurt people hunting the back issue market, but this feels like a completely necessary temporary move for the industry. And it's something that carries relatively little risk to stores, especially those who are not entirely dependent on the direct market. I mean, to the contrary, it saves a lot of risk to stores if stores go pure direct order. They're granted their money would be down, but their outlay would be down too. So it gets to be much more clean. I think with variant schemes, the shelves won't be exactly completely empty, but the back issues will better reflect real demand. And then as titles get a better flow of creators, I'm sure the stores will start to return to those extra copies. As a retailer yourself, I'm especially interested in your perspective. Is this what the industry needs to slap some sense into the publishers? Um, well, whether the industry needs to, whether this needs to be slapped into the sense of the publishers or not, it's going to happen. So a number of stores are quickly moving to this, and they're moving to it, out of just necessity. It's been too risky to order a lot of extra copies for the shelves. It's just too hard, and invariably it doesn't work. It's the stock is stacking up. People aren't coming in to buy up that stock. Shops are pulling back further and further and further. And eventually, if a shop does have a viable kind of revenue plan that's outside of new comics, and no, that's back issues, sure, but I mean something in addition to that. If they're selling something in that shop beyond new issues, then this is arguably one of the smarter moves they can make. Now, this is not healthy for comics in the sense that chemotherapy is not healthy for cancer, but it can cure cancer. So, not healthy for chemotherapy is not healthy, but may be necessary to cure cancer. It's kind of the word is what I'm saying. It is the comic industry is definitely reliant on a very traditional pump and dump, particularly at the top, scheme when it comes to comics. This is the kind of the way the big two have kind of clung on in a lot of cases. Because while the big two definitely have some comics that sell really, really well, like Batman or hell, even the X-Men, Avengers, Spider-Man, their big marquee titles sell well. Also Batman, different kind of Batman, Batman the Urban Defender, Batman's car, Batman checks out a chick using a side view while fighting crimes. Lots of different Batman titles. Anyway, so if suddenly comic shops drew back like that, what would happen is what you identify. Basically, all of the independents, all the smaller titles, would rapidly evaporate. It would become a meat and potatoes business really, really quick. Now, that's not inherently bad, except a lot of those those other titles are the titles of kind of new and emerging creators coming up into the industry. And if you suddenly knock those out, well, you're going to eliminate a lot of that kind of influx of talent, which means, if you go back, say, 20, 30 years when Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, and others were coming up, Rob Liefeld, they didn't come up on the biggest titles. They came up on smaller titles. And so if you no longer have smaller titles, it's going to do a kind of a weird thing to comics. But again, you may be right. It may be entirely necessary in order to get publishers basically to say, look, we need to make comics and make a volume of comics move to sell. So maybe instead of publishing 80 comics a month, we need to publish a tight 40 comics a month, but make those 40 count. It would probably have that effect. But like chemotherapy, while it might cure the cancer, it's also going to do a hell of a lot of damage to the patient. It is the nuclear option in a lot of cases. If you suddenly basically eliminate a big part of the direct market, you are doing the opposite of what the comic industry needs. What the comic industry needs is to be able to grow, to be able to find new areas to distribute comics, to be able to expand. This is a contraction. Now, to your point, maybe it's a necessary contraction. Maybe by doing that, the business gets stabilized. People caught, looking at comics as a portfolio business. But it wouldn't exactly, none of this would be great. If you're a comic shop that is basically, losing money on a bunch of new titles, new comics, then you do have to question what you're doing, because you've made bad decisions. And I think that's an area where, unless you're moving them, if you're sitting there with stacks and stacks of unsold comics month after month, then yeah, a mistake has been made. But I don't believe that's many stores. And frankly, the stores that have been doing that are rapidly veering toward being out of business. and that's the sad truth of that. So it is. I don't know. I'm very mixed because I don't believe that a good idea is to cut business in order to save business. But sometimes you're right. Sometimes it's necessary. You got to cut off the gangrene. You got to cut off. And in this case, the thing you're cutting off is not all the woke comics. You're cutting off unhealthy business practices, and unhealthy business practice is quite simply, quite frankly, pushing far more comics into the market than is reasonable to be sold. Comic shops cannot get their arms around 80 comics a month. They can't, and they don't. And so what you're seeing is people are just giving up. They're ordering the core titles, and they're not bothering with the rest. And so this strategy is not unlike that. I mean, another way you do it is you don't cut completely new comics out, but you basically say, look, we're going to carry the 10 most popular comics that you publish, Marvel, every month, and that's it. And the rest is all order on demand. One of the things that's getting in the way of this is that comic shops, many of them, do not have a good order-taking system. If suddenly there was a really nice website and comic shops could just basically point, customers at that, and some of you may say, well, that's Comics Hub. Well, there are a couple out there that do this, but none of which are, cost-effective enough for stores and do the volume to justify what they're about. But if you just had some basic website where a customer could come in, like click, 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 this is what I want to order, and they kind of manage their comics that way, then it would be easier to move to this. But the reality is the comic shops struggle to do this well, and so it's a pain. But unfortunately, yeah, I mean, is this what the comic industry needs? Maybe. It's tough to agree. It's tough to go all in on that idea. But maybe that's what's necessary. So I pose it to you. What do you, the audience, think? Is this necessary? Is this a good plan? Bad plan? What do you think? Is this what's going to kind of jar the industry? In this case, the jarring has to be, look, you're putting out more comics than you know how to sell, that you could market correctly. Until you can get that in order and get a good kind of path going, better to pull back. Anyway, that's my thought on it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.